Hello, Internet! I'm HamsterBomb.
And I'm Timothy.
And I'm Zach.
And you guys are joining us for another episode of HITBOX, the gaming podcast where we just kind of talk about whatever we darn well please. And look at this, we have 3 people here today.
That's one more than 2.
That is one more than 2. I think this is... And that's why we have you here, Zach.
You're welcome.
Yeah, because none of us can actually do math properly. Before we actually get into our topic today, which, for the record, while we're actually, showing some generic gameplay here, I'm going to be playing Nova Drift, just because it's a simple game that I could be playing in the background while we're talking about our main topic. We have some fun news for this episode. You can all welcome Zach as our brand new editor for HamsterBomb. First time we've actually had help, straight up making consistent videos. And because of that, I can already feel his influence and help on the channel, because at the very end of this, there's going to be a new outro. Finally, I was able to sit down and just make a new outro. It's been, I don't know how many years of just no outro changes, but there we go. We finally have a new one.
It's been a hot minute.
Yeah, because editing these videos really takes a long time, and making this stuff takes a long time. And we can only really make these videos at all just because of you guys supporting us on PayPal, Patreon, all that stuff. So anyway, all that fun pluggy stuff that I'm sure nobody cares about aside, we are going to be talking about video game controllers today.
Yeah.
Good, bad, and we might have a whole one where we just talk about knockoff unofficial game controllers so we can get into the ugly, because there are some bad ones. But we're going to just talk about specifically the ones that are actually real, came with their console.
Versus the ones that are not real.
Well, you know what I mean. There's, you can get a Nintendo Switch Pro Controller, but you can also get a Power A Pro Controller.
Well, Power A is officially
Power
licensed.
A is officially licensed, but it's not what...
Controllers that Nintendo made, that Sony made,
exactly,
Microsoft made.
Okay, so that's really what we're gonna try and get into today.
The official ones.
Exactly. So, we're gonna do this kind of similar to how we did our episode with Kim, where we just talked about the best first, because we gotta understand what makes something good before we talk about what makes them bad. So. Yeah. We're going to focus on just going through each other's lists in order. They recommended we start with mine, and I'm going to go through my top 5 worst. We didn't try to compare notes. We will talk about some of the same controllers multiple times, but that's just because each person's making their own lists. Now, each person is going to be able to have totally different opinions on these controllers in general. We all grew up with different game consoles. We played them at different times. And because of that, we're all going to have different opinions on how the controllers work and
guess
play.
What controllers are on my list.
Yeah,
Spoiler, it's Sony.
Yeah, right. So, anyway, just to get started, in this, really, when I was thinking of worst controllers, I was thinking of ones that I've actually played with.
That was another thing.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say, I thought that the Virtual Boy looked really bad, or the Steam controller is terrible because it looks terrible, but I'm not going to buy it because it looks terrible.
Yeah.
So.
And I have some controllers on mine where it's yes, I've played them, but not extensively.
Yeah.
Because they were so bad, I didn't want to play it.
Right, and it's not fair to try to critique something you haven't properly gotten to know well enough.
Exactly, and I totally did not want to do that.
Yeah.
So instead, what I was focusing on were specifically ones that I've played with that I look at and I go, I really don't want to play with this. Is there any way I can get around this? And with that is what I was thinking for the bad ones. Hopefully you guys were doing the same thing so that it's kind of consistent. We don't have to reestablish that each time.
Yeah.
But anyway, another thing really quick before I get into the controllers, I wanted to, while we're playing a game, play something kind of generic like Nova Drift, which is what we're doing now, because this is a game that really could be played with a D-pad and 2 buttons. And that's it. So you can kind of imagine, play a generic game like this. Try not to think about the library of the games that come with these. Just think about playing something simple, even like this. Would that controller feel good to play?
Right.
Okay, so starting with my best controllers list, my top 5, starting at number 5, working our way up. I think that the 5th best controller I've ever used was the Super Nintendo controller.
Shock and surprise.
Yeah, that is just a darn good controller. It's kind of hard to explain why I think it's so good, though. But that's the point of the podcast. I'm gonna try. I think it just feels good in your hand. Maybe it's just the shape of it. The buttons, it's a very simple controller. I really like the D-pad on that. The arrangement of the buttons as well. It's a very simple grid. I feel like you never really need to look down at that controller in order to play it too. Like, there's a lot of controllers where they get kind of complicated and confusing, and you don't really know, like, exactly, like, what you're aiming for with your you have to, like, keep looking down. I'm going to talk about some of my worst ones later that's a serious problem for. But Super Nintendo, I feel like you get that in your hand, you really don't need to, like, check what you're doing for any of those things. And most games I've played with it played really well. If anything, some of the games were too ambitious for the controller. So I don't want to hold that back for it. Like, I know Super Mario World feels a little bit better on the Game Boy Advance. Even though it's the same controller, but they remapped some of the controls, and it just felt a little bit better because they were limited to less buttons.
Right.
Going to, like, Super Metroid, you have to do your diagonals with L and R. Yeah, that technically might be better on other controllers, but for what it's doing, say, like, Link to the Past, it feels really, really good. And if you're trying to play something generic like this, I feel like it does a really good job at just keeping, like, everything very consistent. The shape of it feels good in your hands. I just really like that controller. I'm sure it might come up later, though, Kim, you've not even used that. So, I have no idea.
For shame.
No.
My number 4 on my list is the Ps4 Controller. Now, I have played, let me see, PS1, 2, 3, and 4. I've not played a 5 yet. Granted, I gotta say, just from looking at the 5, I know, like I mentioned, we're not gonna get into this too much. The buttons look like they are, like, flat against the controller, and they don't, like, come out, you know what I mean? Like, you don't physically feel them as much, and I do not like that. If that's,
we don't want to spend too much time
I know I don't
talking
want to do
about
that, but we're never gonna cover it, because it's not on any of our lists, because we haven't gotten to play it, but...
well, who can find a PS5?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, like, to the Super Nintendo's point, like, that is something that I really do like. I need to be able to... I need to know what's down in my hand without looking at the screen. So if I can, like, feel exactly what I'm doing, and it's just, like, a direct connection between my brain and the screen, that's perfect.
And that's what you can feel with the PS4 controller, then?
Yes, the Ps4 controller does that really well, too.
Okay.
I don't really care much for that big middle thing, the menu button
That's
thing.
funny. I was going to talk about actually really liking that because the way it's incorporated into some games.
I like the light. It changes the colors based
I'll
on the
talk
games.
about
But
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know. But it's just weird, you know? And I'm not a huge fan of it. But, like, compared to the PS3 controller, which is kind of the same thing, I feel like the actual PS4 controller just feels better in my hand. Also, compared to the other PlayStation controllers, it was just my favorite of the bunch. Which I guess is good, because it feels like they're improving each time, but then the 5th one I'm kind of scared of.
Yeah.
So, number 3... Now, this might be a little weird, considering my list so far, but my number 3 is the NES controller.
That does seem a little odd.
Because, yeah, I actually think the
Yeah.
NES controller is better than the Super Nintendo, and that's probably not a very popular opinion.
Well,
but,
why is it better than the Super Nintendo?
Once again, I'm not thinking about the games you can play with them, or how the games are played. And that's what's kind of tough about differentiating the two of those controllers. Because you're basically letting go of the fact that you have X and Y and L and R. So if you're just going for simplicity, yeah, the NES, I feel like, has a better D-pad than the Super Nintendo. And I feel like the NES has better button shapes than the Super Nintendo. The button shapes on the NES are actually, like, concave. And the Super Nintendo, they cave out. They're convex, right? So
Yeah.
when you actually... Well, they're actually slightly concave, but I don't feel like they're as convex or concave as the NES ones. Something about that, like, shapes the inside of your thumb better. And controllers, what I will get into later, and actually my next one, are ones that feel like they were made for human hands, and they just fit really well. And a lot of knockoff controllers that we might eventually make a video about do this terribly. But the main NES shape, those buttons, like, I know hands are not rectangular. So, of course, that's probably the big thing. People are like, but the Super Nintendo curves, yes, that feels better. But the D-pad, I feel like, is the most responsive D-pad I have ever used. the best D-pad is on the NES. And those 2 buttons you have, plus start and select, I think you can feel pretty good.
Yeah.
I really like just the general use of, like, how those buttons feel. That controller has, like, the best feel, with unfortunately very, very few buttons on it. But, like I said, I'm not holding any of that against it. Number 2, speaking of really good feel in game controllers, the GameCube. The Nintendo GameCube controller is probably one of the best controllers ever. People adore that controller, and I do too.
Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah, that controller just feels like they realized the N64 controller was really weird. Nobody has 3 hands, and we don't need to keep focusing on how strange that was. Instead, like, look
we'll
at
talk about it.
We'll get there, yeah.
Everyone's got an opinion about the N64 controller.
Which had a lot of funny knockoff stuff, which would have been in this video,
the
too.
The N64 probably had the largest library of knockoff controllers. Excluding, like, maybe the NES. I think had quite a few weird ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird accessories. Once again, I knew that's what this video was going to turn into if we talked about them too much. But, like, the GameCube had the Wavebird, and that was basically a weightier GameCube controller because it had batteries in it, and that is kind of great.
I mean, that's amazing for GameCube era.
Controllers, wireless controllers in general are just great. That's just better. And I was actually really scared when the Wavebird came out, thinking like, oh, that's connectivity's not going to be great. It's going to be spotty. There's going to be input delay because I'm playing Smash Melee on this, and every frame matters. I'm not messing with that. But no, it was actually really, really good, and I was shocked at how great it felt. The number 1 best controller, though, is, in my opinion, just a better version of the GameCube controller, and that once again could be argued. But in my opinion, the Nintendo Switch Pro Controller is just a better GameCube controller. That thing is basically like taking the general shape of what we should have had from other controllers, like the Super Nintendo button layout, and not making the X and Y those weird shapes, which is fine. It works because that's just the shape of your fingers, you know? That's why the GameCube controller feels so good. It just works to the shape of your hand. But the Pro Controller, if anything, it's more like taking everything we've got from other controllers and just putting it into one. If anything, I might not even like it if the Pro Controller's buttons dipped in like the NES, because that works really well for the NES because you've only got the 2. If you do that with 4, I don't know, that might feel kind of weird. So I feel like that one just in general has been the best one. The analog is bigger too. I'm gonna get into talking about Joy-Cons later. In fact, we might talk about Joy-Cons a lot in this, but
maybe.
Yeah, just for talking about the best. Personally, if I'm going to sit down and want to play anything, I want a Switch Pro Controller. It makes me feel the most comfortable.
There you go.
Which is actually a really good segue into my best list. His favorite is the Switch Lite. It's still my best list, of course. So my number 5 is actually the Switch Pro Controller. Yes, I like the Switch Pro Controller, but it's a little bit bulky for me, and I even opted to play Hollow Knight on the Joy-Cons over the Switch Pro Controller.
I think that was because you started with the Joy-Cons.
That's kind of just where I started, but I'm not saying that Joy-Cons isn't even on my best list, and I just thought I gotta include the Switch Pro Controller because it is a good controller. It feels comfortable in your hand, the connectivity's generally good, but I think it can be a little bit bulky, and I've had some issues pressing L3 on it a few times.
Really?
And that might just be like my user error, but it's still a great controller. I'm still gonna use it.
Yeah.
My number 4, not surprising, is the Ps2 Controller.
Yeah.
The Ps2, I love the weight of that controller. That just felt good in my hands. The analogs were easy to access, especially when we started getting games where you can rotate your camera around. It was great having those 2 analogs at the same time. And, you know, the D-pad was still physical buttons at the time, so you could press each of the buttons and move around. And learning to use L2 and R2 were buttons still. They weren't triggers yet.
Yeah.
And that still felt pretty good when you were using it overall.
There's a lot of modern controllers still that don't have them having that, like, haptic feedback, you know, where they actually, like...
Where you can do the pressure sensitivity.
Yeah, it's like a trigger.
Right.
Yeah.
So I really like
the Switch Pro Controller is one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just weird to me. And the GameCube controller does that. So
Whatever.
Yeah,
but
that's very true.
It's so weird.
I love the PS2 controller, and if we want to talk about physical designs, they're black, and I just like it. So I like them being the black color and not like these weird colors that PS5's doing right now. I don't like the white. I'm not a fan of the white, but
That's fair.
my number 3 is going to be the PS1. I'd actually prefer to use the PS1 controller over the PS2.
The weird things we learn when we put them in order. Like how the NES is better than Super Nintendo. This is such an unpopular list already.
Now, if I may ask, are you talking about like the DualShock version or the original?
The original
Without
PS1
the
controller
sticks.
without the
Nice.
No
sticks.
sticks.
Oh, okay.
Nothing. And the reason why I say
Just
that,
the D-pad.
it was a much lighter
Yeah, it's a
version
very
of
light
the PS2.
controller.
It's a very light controller. And it's funny, we recently got a PlayStation Classic, and I put that in my hand, and it felt so good. I remembered why I liked the PS1 so much, and it just felt so right. It's a very simple controller, and I like that too. You've got your 4 buttons, your D-pad still buttons, and like no analog, and it's this nice like lightweight feeling. You can pick it up and go, and I didn't feel like I was gonna break it either. That was like another thing with the weight kind of situation. If you have like a PS2, sometimes the heavier controllers, if they hit something, you feel like they're gonna break easier.
Especially when you throw it against the wall.
Right. And cleaning wise, weird thing. The PS1 controllers are easy to clean. The PS2 ones have a little bit more indentations in them and can get a lot more skin flakes in them and stuff like that. So they're a little bit easier to clean.
Good old skin juice.
Mm-hmm.
I also thought for my list, I started thinking about our portable systems because those are controllers as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has always felt great in my hand is the DS, the original DS.
DS, the first
The
one.
original.
Yeah, I
big
think it's called the
bulky
DS Fat, is what they call
They
that.
call it the Fat, but
Yeah.
I love
Example.
I
Yeah,
love the way that it
She
feels
found my my original DS.
in my hand. Like, it fits and molds in the bottom part of it, like molds into your hand just really well.
I was so sad that none of the new DSs did any of that. Where the bottom part was way fatter than the top. I guess they thought that was the downside. I thought that was the best feature.
I liked that. I like how that felt in my hand. It like sat in my hand well. I could play for a long time.
And I felt like it was
because
just
of
as
that.
portable because it was like a little smaller than the other ones. Yeah.
Like I could play for so long because it was comfortable enough to sit in my hand like that, and all the buttons are a good size. They're within reaching distance of each other, and you've got R1, L1 again on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good. Unsurprisingly, my number 1 is the Ps4 controller.
Shock and awe.
I really like the PS4 controller. I like the little indentation that they did on the analog sticks. I don't know if you've noticed that between the PS3 to the PS4. They've got like this little lip in there, and it's a lot easier to get a good grip on them. I like the big button in the middle because sometimes it has really good uses in certain games. As long as the game's utilizing it, it can be a useful tool. It's easy to hit to pause a game a lot of the times.
Frantically.
Right? Like, I just like it. Like, I think in Witcher 3, it pulls up your menu. I think if you hit that.
Okay.
It's usually like a big menu button, and that's just kind of nice to hit. My only complaint about it is sometimes I wish the options button and the select button were a little larger. But other than that, I liked having that big giant button in the middle. I liked having the indentations on the analogs. That felt pretty good. So that's my number 1.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think our number 1s and number 5s or 4s like rearranged. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, right. So, I guess we'll go with me next.
Sure. You do happen to be next.
Wait, see, now this is why you are also here. You're also the host. I wouldn't know what to do otherwise without your guidance. I'm the math guy here.
I deserved that snark back.
You jerk. So, I had trouble kind of paring it down a little bit. So my number 5 is a bit of a tie, and I'll explain a little bit. It's between the Xbox One style controller and the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. For me, it's the exact same kind of layout in terms of functionality. Like, the stick is in the upper right, the other one's in the down left, and, you've still got the diamond-shaped buttons. Yeah, the A and the B's and the X and Y's are switched around, but honestly, when you're in the middle of a game, the button layout that you're expected to use is pretty much the same. Like if I was using it for if I was going
Alex's worst list is it's fine. Just let Zach go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let Zach go.
Like
Just
if
let
I
me
was
know, and I
playing
completely disagree.
If I was playing Hollow Knight with the Switch Pro Controller, I would use B to jump and X to attack, whereas on the Xbox One,
same
yeah,
layout kind of thing. And that's what I was talking about earlier with Alex. I agree with Zach on this wholeheartedly.
Yeah, but it's like I don't know. It's like they're very good modern controllers, both of them, and it's like I'm just happy that at least for the Xbox One version of the controller, the D-pad is really good on it versus earlier ones, which we'll talk about later, I assume.
Yeah.
with Xbox controller D-pads, but yeah, I just like the various. I just like the various.
We're not to it yet.
I'm sorry, I just threw open my mouth a little bit.
I've been there, buddy.
Well,
believe
okay,
me.
Zach and I agree then at least. Switch Pro Controller is number 5.
Yes.
You've been outnumbered.
Democracy, baby. So, moving on from that, my number 4 would be the Super Nintendo controller. And I put that above because, that is where we basically get the modern day controller from, was from the Super Nintendo controller. That diamond button layout for the face buttons, the L and R, start and select and all that. And it still feels really good to use and play. Like you said, you guys got the Switch Classic. I wasn't able to find one. But whenever I've been over and I've been playing it, it's like, yes, this is why modern controllers adopted this. This is why Sony,
SNES,
to me feels similar, right?
And that was actually something Alex and I had talked about earlier today. And I said, wow, Sony with the PlayStation kind of created this layout. And he was like, no, actually it starts with the SNES. And Sony added handles to it.
Yep. They put handles on the dog bone, basically.
Yeah.
That was their major contribution. But yeah, it's still a controller from 1990 that still feels good to use and play in the modern day. That to me is pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
My number 3, which is completely different and divisive, even amongst you guys, I think. My favorite third one is the Dreamcast controller. I cannot help it. I
don't think it's that
love
bad.
No.
I never played it enough to really give an opinion.
We only played it once over here. I think we were playing some Crazy Taxi.
Yeah, because I brought it with you. You still had your tube TV out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love it just because of the sheer fact of I don't care how oddly designed it looks. It still feels good to hold. The triggers on the back, the L and R, feel really good to have. They're spring-loaded, so it's like you can press it down slow to do certain actions or really fast, depending on how you want to do things. Yeah, it doesn't have a second analog stick, which, would make some 3D games a little bit easier to maneuver. But the thing that I love most about it is the fact that the little memory card, the visual memory unit, goes inside and has different functions for different games. Like, say you're playing Resident Evil Code Veronica, your health bar is in there, so you don't have to pause to see how bad off you are. You can just look down like, oh, I need an herb. Or, you can raise Chow from Sonic Adventure.
That's so weird.
Which is where I spend a majority of my time. But it's that functionality between those.
I think that's everybody for that game.
Yeah, for real.
Just Chows.
Just Chow. But yeah, those are my reasons. I like breaking out my Dreamcast from time to time. Just to play it. My number 2 would be the Ps1 Dualshock Controller. Some Sony love there, so that should be nice for you, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think I actually had the DualShock original PS1 Sony one. I think I played with the original Sony without the analog, and then I jumped to the PS2.
See, my first home console was the PS1, spelled ONE, the redesign.
Oh, yeah, the little rounded
Yes,
one.
exactly. And so it came bundled with DualShock controllers. I love that thing so much because, again, the PlayStation was my first console I ever played. So just to be able to hold something like that and just to be able to have those little analog sticks in there to be able to just do what you want, even though as a kid I never used them because I was so used to playing with the D-pad. So I didn't even use the full functionality of it.
Right.
But the thing that I really appreciate about it is that this is really Sony's major contribution to controllers. It added the 2 analog sticks.
The analogs. And I love the placement of those analogs with the Sony controllers.
Yeah, depending on my mood, it always goes between either the Microsoft or the Sony way of layout for me. It's just like, they're so similar to me in that regard. But anyway, just the rumble, the sticks, just the nostalgia. If you guys can't tell, I'm more of a nostalgia-driven person when it comes to stuff like this. So,
well, that's why I'm really biased to the PlayStation. Because that's, although my first game system was Atari and Sega, that's what I played more when I was like really little. I didn't like get into games until I got my PS1. That's when I like really hit the ground running.
The Atari could have been on this list. But a joystick and a button.
Considered it.
Yeah, she did. There's nothing wrong with it.
No, absolutely
it works.
not.
It does its job.
Yeah. But for my number 1, it's a previously mentioned controller, the GameCube controller. I cannot tell you how many hours I sunk into my GameCube. Like from middle school into high school.
Well, actually, I probably can with my video game resume.
Probably.
But yeah.
We have documentation.
I have documentation.
Oh my gosh, I'm thorough, but not that thorough.
Yeah. I'm crazy.
I've hung out enough with you guys to know.
Lists are my lifeblood.
Oh, that GameCube controller is so good. I feel like I didn't give it enough justice and explain why it's so good. Because Kim has asked me that before because she never really played it growing up with PlayStation. So, Zach, please help explain why is that one so good?
So, it's a very Nintendo way of making a controller, if that makes sense. Like, they made basically, like, the best, like, the pinnacle of what we would consider modern design with the Super Nintendo controller going forward. Then they changed it up and made a weird controller for the 64, but then they came back and they're like, you know what? Let's do that, but better. And that's pretty much what they did. They kept those little notches in the 8 directions on the control stick, so it was easier to move around. The face buttons were rearranged, like you said, for your thumb placement. So that way, the A button was big, the B button was a little bit smaller, and then you had those bean-shaped X and Y buttons. Because, depending on...
The beans.
Yeah, the beans. The beans.
The beans.
They are beans.
Yeah, that kind of beans.
They're like kidney beans on your GameCube controller.
Beans.
But, depending on not only their priority in the games, but also depending on, where your thumb placement is, like I said. And just those shoulder buttons. I have never played with a controller that I felt good just to use
They
the
are
L&R
satisfying.
Oh,
to click
I know.
That click they make, especially with Mario Sunshine, that's what sold me. Like, wait, you're saying that if I press it in further, I can get Mario to stand still and just drown my enemies?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like it was just so
In fact,
good.
you could even control, I think that might have been the first time we had controllers with triggers that would actually like be sensitive to.
I think
so.
Yeah,
pressure sensitive.
Yeah, well, the PS2, the face buttons were pressure sensitive, as we found out with Metal Gear Solid 3.
Yeah, it didn't work that well, but
no.
yeah.
No, but I think Nintendo did it better with their shoulder buttons.
Because even especially in Mario Sunshine, you really felt like, because that actually mattered. That's why that game doesn't port very well to the Switch, because you need to be able to control how much water you're forcing through with FLUDD.
Yeah, that's why they had to patch it in way after the fact, which annoyed me to no end. But yeah, GameCube controller I don't think really personally has been top for me. So
I agree. Yeah,
but there you go.
Darn good controller.
But of course, with all good things,
there's bad things.
There's bad things.
And
I have to say, there's a specific controller out there that has generated some awful habits that I have now with controllers.
Oh, that's a shame.
And that is, we'll get into that because I think I'm making my Joy-Con drift worse
Alex,
because of these habits.
So Alex, why don't you lead us off? What is your least hated controller?
Here we get least hated
least
controller.
hated controller.
my least hated
Your
controller?
least hated.
Your least hated controller.
Your number 5.
Number 5 least hated controller. Any Xbox controller.
Oh wow. That's why you were
any Xbox controller.
That's why you were disgruntled with my statement.
Yes. And it's because so yes, there's many reasons, and I'll get into the D-pad thing. I hate that. But now we gotta understand.
Yeah.
Nintendo, in the Game & Watch era, invented the D-pad. They did. Gunpei Yokoi was revolutionizing a lot of really cool stuff, and they did patent it because they were making toys. That's what you do.
Yeah.
So they patented the D-pad, and now everyone's kind of trying to copy the D-pad, so...
But they can't
Microsoft,
do the D-pad.
Oh my god, could not have messed it up any worse than they did. Okay, fine, I'm in the D-pad thing. It's a freaking circle. It doesn't work. I tried playing Shovel Knight with this. It was so bad. I tried playing. What else did I play? Cave Story. There's so many things you play. It matters. It matters when you're able to when I say the NES and the Super Nintendo are so great because their D-pads are so good.
Yeah.
How can you mess it up so very badly? Like a decade later, and they're still messing them up. But anyway, so the D-pad, I hate their D-pads. They're not even D-pads. They're more like discs.
That's
and
Microsoft for you.
I like the
sucks.
PlayStation ones. They're like full-on buttons still, but they got like this cute little shape to them. And
yeah, doesn't it have like a rod in the center that they kind of rotate on?
Yeah, you can rotate
it's not
on a little bit.
It's not exactly like a Nintendo D-pad.
No, it's made differently.
But yeah, no.
Any other complaints there? Like certain
so the certain buttons being out of place, and they mess me up constantly. There is no sense in this, other than the fact that I think there's also patents on the arrangement of the buttons, but they didn't even have to keep the same letters.
In which shapes? Yeah, if you
it's the fact that they changed the letters
or
nothing,
numbers on it.
Yeah, it could have been anything. Like how you can easily port a Nintendo/PlayStation game from one to each other, and it has no bearing on the game at all because you just say, okay, the button to the right. It was A, and now it's
circle.
And now it's circle. It's easy. It's 1-to-1. There's no problems. But Microsoft, you decide to use the same goddamn letters as Nintendo, but you move them around. So now, when you try and play from one to the other, everything's wrong. You're pushing the wrong buttons, and like what I said before, you have to keep looking down at your controller. That's a sign of a bad controller. Inevitably, you're going to have to go down, and I'm giving Xbox crap for this, because they are the ones who copied the Nintendo controller and fudged it all up. Any Xbox controller. Now, here, granted, their triggers are very nice.
Oh, yeah.
They weight very well in your hand. Mm-hmm. The analog is okay. And that's really
it's
it.
Your least hated
It's
controller.
my least hated controller.
What's your fourth?
My fourth least hated controller? I feel bad saying this, but the N64 controller is really bad.
Oh,
it's really bad.
I disagree with you, but I see where you're coming
from. I'll let Alex finish.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I'm just gonna say, I don't have 3 hands. like, what were they thinking?
You're not a Vortigaunt from half?
No. Vortigaunt from half. No. There's the fact that the whole controller itself just seems really weird. Now, coming from the Super Nintendo, yeah, it's really taking controllers into a brave new direction, and we learned a lot from it. We got the GameCube controller out of it.
Yeah.
It really is the in-between point of that. But it's crazy. It's clunky. That analog is probably the worst analog I've ever used, but it's also the earliest analog, isn't it? It's one of the well, do you count Atari? That's also a really bad.
Joystick.
That's different.
Okay, fine.
Technically.
Okay, fine. For one that's intended for
the technology inside the joystick is different than an analog.
Fine.
Yeah.
Fine. Technically.
But I understand. I see where you're coming from because you always go to those used game stores and you always ask, "Hey, do you have a 64 controller?" "Oh yeah, do you have an official one?" Yeah, sure. The analog stick isn't working properly."
The analog's never working.
I will get to this.
Yeah.
Oh man. I've always found it really clunky. Granted, I actually kind of liked the what would become the C stick, which is the C buttons. Some part of me actually kind of prefers to have buttons instead of an analog, which is kind of strange. Oh, I thought I was dead before then. Oh well. So it just felt really weird. Like the Z button didn't feel right. Like there was no one way to really feel that controller. I got some
opinions about this controller.
I know, we'll get there. Because here was one of the things I feel is the biggest problem with that controller. Say you are playing on the same console. You go to your neighbor's house who has the same console, but they're playing a different game. So if they pop in Star Fox, and you were playing Ocarina of Time at your house, Now they have to describe how to use the same controller to you because the game is different. And the game needs to be played in a different way with the same controller. That sucks. That just sucks.
That's fair.
So I'm not a big fan of that thing.
What about your middle-hated controller?
Your middle-hated.
My middle-hated controller. Once again, I kind of feel bad for this because I'm not judging the games on the console. Because really, we could have seen Wii U show up in here, but I have not played a Wii U because I make smart purchasing decisions. No, I don't. But
I actually said earlier, I was about to say, oh, I wish I had played a Wii U so I could talk about it. And then I was like, oh, wait.
No, I don't.
No, I don't.
No, I don't.
You have a Switch, you've played the Wii U, basically.
Well, except Star Fox Zero and all sorts of interesting problems that come arise with that.
Are you missing out on much?
I want to remake a Star Fox 64, but I don't want it to play like that. Another video.
Okay.
So, in that same
Number
vein,
3.
this is why it's coming to this, is the Nintendo Wii. Basically, specifically the Wiimote. I just do not like that thing. So, yes, they did make a better version of the Wiimote, where you actually had better accuracy, which was the only way to play Skyward Sword, which was totally worth it.
Yeah, no.
Hold it up. Hold it up.
Hold it up to the heavens.
Yeah.
Get the power.
Planted skyward.
Yeah, right.
Right. Frickin' stupid.
But we're not talking about the games.
No, we're not talking about the games. So, anyway, the Wiimote, I really didn't like the fact that you had to, like, turn it sideways to play certain games where it was trying to be an NES controller, but it was just a bad NES controller. The buttons were fine, but, like, sometimes you would have to play games where you're holding the controller, like, you know, with the nunchuck, and they didn't have enough buttons, so they're using 1 and 2, which, if you don't know, are down at the bottom. And you actually have to, like, either, like, let go, or I would, like, you have to take the wrist strap off, toss the controller up to grab it, and then, like, toss it back down to yourself. What are you, hot potatoing your own controller just to... That's stupid! It's like they were trying to make, like, and I get it, like, a gimmicky controller just to get it back into people's homes because the GameCube didn't sell as well.
It was a motion control, too.
Yeah,
like, that
it was
a big
all about
thing.
that motion control.
I mean, you gotta say some positive. I think you enjoy this. I enjoy the speaker in the Wiimote. Personally.
I enjoy what No More Heroes does with the speaker and the controller.
I kind of liked it in Twilight Princess, too.
It kind of annoys me in some, like, here, because you say that, but the exact same feature is being used in Skyward Sword for the same reasons,
true.
It is awful just because Fee needs to go drown herself.
Okay, but we're not talking about the game.
We already made an entire video complaining about Fi.
All 47 minutes.
Oh, Zach, and you're gonna have to edit all sorts of crap like that later.
That's fine.
Enjoy.
I need to grow that skill, so...
All right, number 2.
Number 2, my second most hated controller. I honestly thought this would be number 1 when I was doing this, and no, it's not. The Joy-Con is not my number 1. The Joy-Con, you know what really is a big shame? I love the idea of the Joy-Con. I think it's brilliant. The fact that you can, like, disconnect this single controller, share it with somebody so that it is 2 controllers, click them into the physical system and pick that system up and use it. Like, the whole thing, it's brilliant. I love it. Like, the same thing, you can use it sideways, and it's like one controller,
so
and like
great.
it reveals an L and R button inside of it.
Yeah.
You click them together, and now it feels comfortable as, like, here's your analog, here's your face buttons.
You get me really pumped about the Joy-Con, because Overcooked,
Yeah.
you play it sideways.
But then when you put them back together, another thing, like I mentioned, I prefer D-pads. Now here's another thing I weirdly prefer about D-pads over, like, the regular traditional plus shape. I prefer them like the Joy-Con, where it is 4 little buttons.
Really?
Yeah, I'm probably in the vast minority of that, but I want the 4 little buttons, because then I know precisely when I'm doing diagonals and when I'm letting go of the diagonals, because you're basically rolling your thumb over it and, like, pushing with your joints sometimes, and you can be very precise like that. If you're just pushing it with a regular D-pad, that's not an NES controller. The NES one, like I said, it had just enough physical spring back to it that you could feel if you're doing your diagonals right and you're even, like, flipping between them, which matters if you're playing something like Ninja Gaiden or some really hard platforming game. So, like, Hollow Knight, I feel like I needed to do that with those buttons.
Which is funny. I played that whole game with
yeah,
the
Kim
analog.
did it all with the analog, and then when she gets to really stressful platforming segments and almost gives up because she's so mad, she hands it to me. I haven't played this game in like a year, and I do it on my first try because I'm using those buttons. That's why.
I couldn't get into that habit. I just couldn't.
It's so good. It's so good.
But
let's
talk about the bad part of the Joy-Cons. Why
have you guys heard that there's this little thing called Joy-Con drift?
what?
What? No.
So
no.
This one thing takes what would have been one of the best controllers ever, and I do not exaggerate. The Joy-Con would if Nintendo fixed them and released a new Joy-Con and they don't drift at all, and it takes years for them to, because inevitably it's physical hardware. It's going to get loose.
Yeah.
That probably would be one of the best controllers ever. But no, the Joy-Con drift is awful, and it happens so quickly, and it ruins the entire controller. Yes, Nintendo lets you send them in if you live in certain countries to get them fixed for free.
Ugh.
But that's still not okay, because it takes so long. Like, I have one downstairs right now that is drifting terribly, and I'm basically just waiting for another one to drift before I send them in, because I'm trying to make it more efficient, because how annoying it is to get them fixed. I'm pretty sure we even bought an extra pair of Joy-Cons because how annoying it was to fix them, because while they're gone and it takes so long, you want to play your system.
Yeah, right.
And it's funny.
It shouldn't even be a thing. What's going to happen in like another 10 years when the Switch is obsolete and you want to play it, but you physically can't
repair it
because of the Joy-Con?
So it's funny you say that, because I remember actually with the PS4, that does drift too. Now it takes a very long time compared to the Joy-Cons, but you know how you fix it? You get out some alcohol wipes and a Q-tip and you clean it.
Yeah, right.
Right, because you can actually open up the controller.
Right. I've actually opened up so many controllers, I don't even think I could name... I'm going to try. I've opened up the Gamecube multiple times, the PS3, the PS4. I have opened up Power A, Nintendo controllers, the Xbox controller. The Power A's are Nintendo Switch wired controllers, by the way. I have not opened a Nintendo Switch Joy-Con, however, because if you do, you void your warranty, and then you can't send them back to get them fixed for free. See, it sucks. Like, I can easily open up my old controllers. Sure, it's annoying. Takes probably like 30 minutes, but I can clean them, and they'll start working again, except for my stupid PS3 controller, which for some reason I cannot get the face button to work, and Kratos will not stop using the square button, so I can never beat that game.
Constant anger.
He's... Constant anger, but only with the square button, which means no combos ever again, which kind of killed the game because I can't win anymore. But yeah, so the Joy-Con.
Why, PS3 was not on my best list. I had 1, 2, and 4. I didn't like 3.
That's what really sucks about that stinking Joy-Con, though.
Yeah.
That's that poor controller. I feel like you could have done so much more with this. It's just a shame that they messed this up so badly.
But it's not your number one.
But it is not my number one.
Tell us what your number one is.
Number one. Now here, once again, what I'm thinking about a bad controller, I'm thinking not about the things you can play with them. I'm thinking, like, if I want to sit down and I have an option of certain ways to play a game, my absolute last option, I will never do it under any circumstance unless I am forced to, kicking and screaming, a keyboard. I detest playing with a keyboard.
He's not talking about with a mouse.
I'm not saying mouse and keyboard. There's a lot of games that are designed for a mouse, and you can't do that with other things, and that makes sense. Now, first-person shooters, I get that. You kind of need to use a mouse sometimes. It personally gets me really motion sick, and that's a me thing, and I'm not putting that into it. This is the keyboard. This is an office tool. It has nothing to do with video games. It was never designed for this, but for some stupid reason I will never understand, somebody decided, hey, you know what? We're going to try and use this giant brick of a rectangle and try and control a video game with it. But no, there's arrow keys over here, but we're not going to do it like that. We're going to control those because other controllers, you control your movement on the left side. Let's hover our controller or our fingers carpal tunnel style over the left side and try and WASD because, I don't know, that kind of makes sense. And then we're going to be over here. Oh, yeah, and kind of hit like E and R and just like hop around and like just hit random keys. If you ever want to look at a, quote, controller that you have to constantly look down at, like, where's that again? God damn it. Okay, fine. fine, M. And you're like, okay, fine, where's the F4?
I mean, that's important to think about. I know there's a ton of computer gaming people. Think about those games where you don't use the mouse. Take the mouse
take them
out
out
of the equation.
Exactly, and there's a lot of them that are like that. So
God, I do not want to play Doom on a keyboard.
Yeah, just play. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
you
no,
realize what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
Take the mouse out of the equation. Just play with a keyboard.
Well, look, in order to control the original Doom, you don't even use WASD. You use the arrow keys, the space key to open, control to fire, and you have to hold Alt in order to go to enter into a strafe mode. Because you just turn, you don't strafe in the original Dooms. Yeah, I don't want to go back to that. I see what you're saying.
Do we want to talk about the Commodore? Is that the Commodore's problem?
I mean, it's basically a Commodore.
Is that what started this?
But the thing is, like, we're playing as a Commodore today, and people are like, no, it's fine. They're just justifying this. And there's a lot of other games that, like, you try and play like this because it's really the only way to do it. Or if you're trying to play something in a way that I don't know where you would find certain files online and get certain video games that you're going to play on your computer that were not made for the computer. But if you were going to do such a dirty, dirty deed, then you would have a lot of problems because you don't have another controller to plug into your system like a normal sentient human being. Sorry.
See, when he was talking about the keyboard, I was like, but I like playing, like, sandbox games.
Exactly.
But he's like, but
Roller
you
Coaster
use the
Tycoon.
mouse.
You're using the mouse, and it's designed for the mouse.
And if the mouse wasn't there, that would just be a pain in the
It would be horrible. It'd be horrible.
So, yeah.
Right, and I've played a lot of games like that. Like, I remember, actually, I don't remember playing any games illegally like that. What are you talking about? There's some that okay, hold on. I played Super Mario Brothers, and I own that game physically. So I played it, like, on my computer, right? I wanted it on my laptop when I was younger. And I'd go, like, this is awful! Like, you're just trying to play this basic game, an NES game, and it's awful! You know, for the same reasons that, like, my hand is not shaped like this N64 controller, right? You go to a keyboard.
This is an office tool.
It's designed for typing. It's designed for spreadsheets. It's designed for coding. It is not designed for playing a video game.
Are you saying your hands aren't shaped like giant rectangular bricks?
Is this how
Yes,
you type?
I look like Wreck-It Ralph when I'm trying to play video games. But anyway, that's mine. I'm done. We need to move on. So,
Okay.
Kim,
My worst
the
list.
bad.
My least hated one. So, after I was playing Alex's DS, it was my first experience with a DS ever, and I was playing Pokemon Heart Gold, and I loved how the DS felt in my hand, and I could play it for
DS
hours.
is so good. Yeah.
So my parents got me the DS Lite. That was the new thing that came out.
Yeah.
It does not feel the same in your hand. It is like a flat piece of paper in your hand, and the buttons are so tiny, and it's really hard to hit, like, the start button.
We could be just fat hands people, because a lot of people in the comments are probably like, what are you talking about? I love the DS Lite.
Where does my hand feel? It's funny. I think these are both... Oh, no, that's not a DS Lite. Okay.
No, why would I have a DS Lite in here? Those things suck.
Yeah,
That's the
like...
only one I had.
It's so flat and small.
Zach, you don't know what you were missing out on.
It was
no,
hard
I
to
don't.
hit the start button because it was like next to... It was like this little itty bitty
tiny
button.
Yeah.
You know, like, you get those toys where it's like, press the reset button. It's like that, where you have to get out the pin and you have to find the button and put...
The button?
I don't like the DS Lite controller at all. I was excited to have a DS Lite because I knew it was going to run smoother than Alex's DS, but I couldn't play it for long periods because it was uncomfortable in my hand, and yeah, maybe I've just got fat hands, and those are just really hard to hold on to.
It was a me problem too. I really didn't like it.
Well, the thing with, like, the DS, it's kind of rounded, it's smooth, it feels good in your hand, and then the DS Lite's this absolute brick. It's a perfect rectangle, and I can't hold it.
The 3DS and the XL DSs are actually pretty good.
So
Just because it's the size and the weight again.
I'm fine with the 3DS one. It weighed a little bit more than the DS Lite. It was a lot easier to go work, but it wasn't my favorite. It's just there. My next one, talking about feeling good in your hands, this one does not. It's the Sega Game Gear. If anybody has ever played this.
Yeah. I forgot about the Game Gear.
Zach sounds like it wants to give it pity points, but
I do.
No.
So uncomfortable. It's a big, bulky, portable system Mine wasn't even portable. I think I had to plug it into an outlet. I had to buy an adapter for it. But
Oh, that's a shame.
it's so large. The buttons are far apart because of that, and it makes a clicky sound. It wasn't really responsive either. You press like the D-pad, and I just could not get a response with it most of the time. And, you know, it's big, bulky, but not in the smooth, bulky that the DS is.
Mm-hmm.
The comfortable bulky.
Even me with these gigantic hands did not like the Sega Game Gear. The buttons just did not click right with it either. And at least Sega had, at this point, gone to a slightly better format with their buttons, which segues nicely into my third, the Sega Genesis controller, the 3-button one specifically. Because the 3-button just didn't make any sense.
It's just not enough. Well, also, its orientation sucks.
Its orientation
But
makes no sense.
they thought the problem was it wasn't enough, and that's why they made a 6-button later.
I had the 6-button as well, which also didn't make any sense, because
No.
half my games didn't even utilize all 6 buttons.
No, because the Genesis did not come out with 6 buttons in mind, yeah.
Right, so on my Genesis, how can I hit the A button and the C button at the same time? If you guys aren't familiar, it's a straight line on the
freak.
controller.
Now you got freak monkey hands, and there's no explaining that.
Wait, so you got to claw it, basically.
Yeah, you gotta claw the thing to even hit
Ugh,
all 2
God.
buttons.
Speaking of which, what couldn't even fit on my list.
Oh, it's my number 1 though.
Ugh, ugh, good, we'll get there.
Okay.
But the Sega Genesis, and it had these weird teethy claw things at the bottom of it. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like it kind of
Yeah.
almost comes to like a rounded point at the handles.
At
yeah.
the handles. So it was super weird, but you can't. The buttons were in a straight line, which just doesn't logically make sense, you know? Like, I can't hit all those buttons at once. Combos were difficult to do. I played, like, Primal Rage and Mortal Kombat all the time on that. And
Ooh,
I can't
yeah.
do these combos, which is, I think, why they made the 6-button controller. Because when you did fighting games, well, now... Instead of changing the orientation of the 3 buttons we did have, we added another 3 that duplicated exactly, like, did the same thing. Like, on the 6-button, your top 3 controls would be the exact same as your bottom 3 controls, so that way you could hit multiple buttons at once to try to do the same thing.
You know who you have to blame for that? Street Fighter 2.
I know.
Yep.
I know. It's Street Fighter, and they're crazy combos,
Mm-hmm.
but the Genesis should have found a better solution. And the D-pad's really clicky. That's kind of annoying.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that it's all clicky.
It is.
It's like weirdly clicky.
See, D-pads
like,
matter.
It's not good. It's not a good
Yeah.
clicky. It's not like a soft clicky. It's a hard clicky.
Soft click.
So clicky, it's a hard clicky.
It's a hard clicky.
Very descriptive. Thank you.
If you've played on a Sega Genesis, you know what I'm talking about.
No, I do.
My number 2 is the Wiimote. My friends bought it, and I'm just like, how do I play with this?
Well, you know you got a problem too. Well, I didn't mention this about the Wiimote. When, like, say you're playing pretty much any multiplayer game, and you got 3 people to play with, and you have 2 GameCube controllers and a Wiimote.
Someone has to use
The poor
Wiimote.
person using the Wiimote, and they know they're getting the short end of the stick.
Well, my friends didn't even have the GameCube controllers.
Oof.
I think they had a GameCube, but we didn't play with it that much. So we would play the Wii, and, you know, Wii Sports and all that. I mean, who wants a controller that could potentially go skyrocketing into your TV? It was a interesting idea at the time. Don't get me wrong. I have the same complaints that Alex does about it. You know, the buttons are in weird places.
I still never want to ever go back to that ever again.
I don't ever want to use it. No, I did enjoy it with some games. I liked, like, in Monster Hunter Tri,
Yeah.
you could pull out your sword either by hitting the A button or swinging the Wiimote.
Yeah.
That's actually really cool.
That was kind of fun.
That was kind of satisfying every time. But
That's about it.
overall, when I look at the controller and I don't even know how to use it, I have to be taught how to use it. It has to attach to my arm, or I'm going to throw it into something.
Yeah.
Or someone.
Joy-Cons are kind of that, though. They really are tiny Wiimotes.
But I'm not flinging them all over the place.
No.
Like, the games that were developed for the Wiimote were specifically made for motion controls in mind. So they're made to be flung around everywhere. and inappropriately used. Thank you, Cooking Mama. So,
Yeah.
I didn't really understand why the buttons were labeled as 1 and 2. I'd never seen 1 and 2 on any controller before, and that weirded me out.
Yeah, that's just dumb.
Just weirded me
Yeah.
out.
Well, granted, it's what I just said that Microsoft should have done, so
Man,
I guess it's not that dumb, is it?
I'm upset because I thought I put N64 on this list, and then I found there were controllers I hated more than that. But the N64 is the controller why I have analog issues nowadays.
Yeah,
I
you
should have
push
talked
everything
about
like
it with
way
Alex.
too far.
Yeah.
Yeah, she actually does have legitimate problems controlling with analogs just because of that
I played on the
N64
N64
controller.
Bad
all the
muscle
time.
memory. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
right.
bad muscle memory. I can't teach it on myself. I'm not saying the N64 is on my list because I think these controllers are worse than it.
Yeah, speaking of which, we still haven't gotten to the top
To
count.
my number one. But when I think of the N64, if I just chopped off the left side of the controller, I would be good. Because I played like Perfect Dark.
I don't think
on
I've
it,
ever
and it was
used
fine.
the left side of that thing.
I don't think the N64 had that many games you could even use it with.
Yeah, with the D-pad, it was just...
Mischief Makers is the only one I can think of. That's
I
it.
just needed the
Mhm.
right side.
Yeah.
Anyway, my number one worst controller is the PS Vita. I don't know what they were thinking. I played it rarely. You know, my friends
Yeah.
had it, and I tried it in the store a few times, and I just don't know what the thought process was
Is it
there.
bad to say that I forgot about the PS Vita?
Zach, everybody forgot about the PS Vita.
Well, Alex was telling me about bad controls, and my mind went to that because you had to claw the thing, and
The PSP
Hit the
in
back
general is
button.
actually what I was thinking of earlier for like really, really
so
horrible
you like
controllers.
claw the top because
Yeah.
you got to hit all these buttons at once. But you forget this is a Vita now.
It's also
so you
heavy.
got these controls on the bottom.
The touchpad on the back.
On
The
the
touchpad
back.
on the back, yeah.
And the
of
touch screen.
Mhm.
PS Vita.
I forgot.
That is maybe the biggest what the heck were they thinking
And I'm like,
game
how do
controller
I
I've ever
control?
seen.
I can't even see my fingers to know what I'm touching on the bottom of this touchpad that was back here. I'm already clawing the top of it, trying to hit the triggers and the buttons at the top.
Mhm.
Right.
Because Alex is saying, oh man, the PSP controls so bad. And I'm like, oh, let's take it a step farther and put a touch screen on the back
the
of
touchscreen on the
controller.
back, yeah. I know some games took advantage of that and did it well, but the thing is,
Yeah.
all of those games play better when ported to other systems. So,
Yeah, like my big example was like Gravity Rush.
yeah, Gravity Rush.
Like,
Why would you ever actually want to play it on the PSP when you could just play the port?
Yeah,
right.
PS4.
Like,
yeah.
it's just, it was a useless function. I don't even see, it was like touch screens were a new technology at the time, so they thought, we gotta have that on our system. I don't see, I mean, the DS is doing it over there. We got 3DS, and we
So-
need to follow up the PSP, so.
So would you say that the Switch is a better Vita?
No, it doesn't have a touchscreen on the back.
On the back.
Right,
You know,
so
here's
that makes
the
it
thing,
a
has a
better
touch.
Vita.
I love that the Switch has a touchscreen on the front, and almost nobody knows that because nothing uses it.
Yeah, I
Pretty
like
much,
never
yeah.
Well,
used
aren't
that.
we lucky that Super Mario Odyssey doesn't force you to use the touchscreen or something like that? Because that's a Nintendo move right there.
Oh,
To make
gosh.
people painfully aware of the new gimmick of their hardware.
That would have been a Wii U thing.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild forces you to use the touchscreen to use your menu or something dumb.
Ugh.
Because then it would be forcing you to always use it in portable mode, but that's totally a Nintendo thing to do. So
You're gonna play the game we made it how we intended. Gosh darn it.
so I'm just gonna say N64 is on my honorable mention. I played it all the time, and I think I enjoyed it, and I kind of liked that I could force and jam the analog in different directions, and it gave me some really bad habits, and I think I've made our Joy-Con drift because of these bad habits.
Yep, I think they're mostly your fault, but
I
I never
can't-
wanted to say it.
I can't lightly...
She's very rough with those
I
things.
can't lightly touch an analog. Like, my PS2 got the hell beaten out of it because I was used to my N64 analog, where I had to really jam it to make it go anywhere.
Nintendo!
Damn you, Nintendo!
So, it had a lot of bad habits that it gave me, but I'm just putting it on my honorable mention because I had so much fun using,
Yeah.
and I liked using, like, the Z control trigger for guns and shooting, and
Yeah.
I liked the A and B, so...
That's fair.
But I don't have 3 hands.
Yep,
so
and we're already overtime, so let's move.
Yeah, no, well...
Unless there was anything else that you wanted to complain about. With
You knew it was going to take longer because each of us, it was a total of 15 bests and 15 worst.
Well,
so.
I know we're covering a lot of the same ground, too, so I'm hoping that might save us a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's going to be the case with my
Zach's
Okay.
adding the
That's
PS Vita
good.
to his list.
PS Vita number 1.1. No, but so my least hated controller is the Genesis 3-button controller.
It's on your list.
Yeah.
So bad.
Well, because I've never owned a Genesis. I remember playing it when I was real little, when it was new. But I've gone to conventions where they've had like arcade and video game rooms where they've had a lot of Genesis put up. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll play some Golden Axe, and then I forgot. Oh yeah, A, B, and C all in a line curved. So it's like it never felt right.
Barely a curve.
I played Golden Axe on the Switch. That worked great.
That was great.
Oh my God, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, if you port a game from one console to another, and it plays miles better than its original, you got a problem.
Yeah, right. But, I mean, you know, it was something new, and, you know, they were competing with the Nintendo Entertainment System that only had 2 buttons, and this TurboGrafx CD, or TurboGrafx 16, which only had 2 buttons. So, hey, look at us. We're a third better. We've got 3 buttons.
Yeah,
You're
right.
right. Like, the other ones, they were
Look how
in a
much
line
more
at the time
gaming you can
because
do here.
That made sense at the time with 2 buttons, but it doesn't make a lot of sense with 3 buttons.
Exactly. But, you know, it's fine. It works. It functions. It doesn't always hamper gameplay for me. But
it's only your 5th worst.
Right.
5th most hated.
My second least hated controller is the original Xbox 360 controller. So, this was around the time when the Xbox 360 was new and I was in college. One of my buddies, that was his primary console. So I would go spend weekends at his house, you know, and stuff. And I'm used to, like, the PlayStation 2, the Gamecube, and all the way that those feel.
Yeah.
And so I go from those to the 360, and I'm sitting here like, this control stick feels awkward. Is it your control stick? And he's like, no, this is a new one. So I never got used to the analog stick on that one. I liked the weight of it, especially when you put the battery pack in the back. But I never did get any 360 controller, official at least. I never got used to the analog stick, and especially that D-pad. So it's so squishy, and like you said, it's basically a disc.
Yeah, it's
where
awful.
the idea was to make it easier to do like the diagonals, you know, but it never translated that well to better movement for me. I never liked it then. Don't like it now. So yeah, similar complaints. Number 3, so my middle hated, is the Joy-Con, specifically just for
Poor
the
thing.
drift.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many Joy-Con I've gone through since I got my Wii, oh my lord, my Switch back in 2018. I've gone through like 5 pairs of Joy-Con. I've got them just... I just threw some away,
and it's sad. Even the casual players, I feel like, could relate to this issue.
Yeah, it's just money gone.
It's
Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, it also doesn't help that buying a new controller costs about the same as buying a new game.
Yeah, exactly. It is.
And when, you know, a kid who's had his console for years has to ask for a new set of controllers for Christmas instead of a game, that's a failure on the company's part.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, like you said, it's such a marvelous little piece of tech where there's so much in it that they actually utilize and can use really well, but it's just... I have never had any Nintendo product that I've had so much trouble with. My 64 controllers still function perfectly.
Yeah, mine still work well.
And my Switch Joy-Cons are in a bin in my closet. So it's like...
It's funny, like, we bring up the Joy-Cons, I'm like, do people even know it has this infrared functionality thing?
Yeah, it's really, really good, too. That's probably why they cost so much.
So, like,
like, Ring Fit can measure your pulse.
It measures your pulse with that, and that is so cool, which I wish other games kind of used it.
Well, with 1-2 Switch, I mean, whoever remembers that, there was, like, a sandwich eating minigame, and it could detect how far away you were. So, like, you could actually...
With the infrared on it,
yeah. And that was really nice, but... Again, that's just my biggest issue.
And this might be more of a PR thing with the Joy-Con drift because they could have handled it better. But,
for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But it's still also like the controller's fault for being a terrible butt.
terrible, but that's what it is.
My
terrible.
Okay, my biggest complaint about Joy-Con, yes, the drift is awful. Yes, am I making it worse because N64 ingrained that into my memory and it's all Nintendo's fault? Yes, but
yes, we're butthurt.
The buttons are so small.
Yeah.
They're so tiny. If I go to press a button, sometimes when I'm playing Smash Brothers with Alex, he'll take like the Pro or the Gamecube and I'll grab the Joy-Cons and the dog ear.
I offered to give her those, by the way. I'm not like that.
And
she says no.
And if I accidentally have my nails too long and I trying to hit Y, I'm going to hit plus.
Yeah.
Or if I, I have hit multiple buttons at the same time, and maybe it's these damn fat hands. I hit so many buttons at the same time with the Joy-Con.
I was not trying to make a joke. I didn't know you were sensitive about the size of your hands.
It's the only thing I can think why I hit 5 buttons at once on
Maybe
the
it's
Joy-Con.
not Nintendo's fault. Maybe I'm just big in the hands.
I hit so many buttons on the Joy-Con.
What if there was plastic surgery to make smaller hands, Kim?
Tiny hand people.
Tiny hand people.
Is that a fetish?
It might be. Let's not go
Like
there.
half
Let's
the size.
let's not check.
Take out 2 joints in each. Take out a joint in each finger.
You know what? No.
Can I talk about
Let's finish your
my
list.
second?
Can we let
hated?
Zach continue?
I'm sorry, I opened that can of worms. Anyway.
Oh god, this did not need to be the longest hitbox ever, we promise.
We have 3 of us on it.
My second hated
that's the
controller is the PS3 6-axis controller. Not the DualShock 3, the 6-axis one.
Okay, what does that one do? I don't
So, it's exactly the same, but without any rumble.
Why would you buy that?
Because that's all that was available at launch. They did not make DualShock 3s until years into the PS3's life cycle.
That was the staple of the PS2.
Because they said if they put rumble in it, it would mess up the internals, so that way the 6-axis functionality would not work properly. They lied. It works fine, but I did not use the 6-axis controllers.
You're so sour about this.
I am! I loved the PS3. Honestly, I thought it was really cool. It was my Blu-ray player at the time.
PS3.
Yeah.
Because, you know, a regular Blu-ray player was still freaking expensive.
And it was still kind of unheard of to have your console connect to the internet to, like, the Wii was, like, one of the first ones I knew to do this, and then, like, the PS3 when that came out.
Yeah, and it was nice that I could actually browse the web. I didn't have to pay a subscription service to use PSN or anything like that.
Yeah, looking at you, Sony.
We'll probably have an entire video on online services.
But anyway, yeah, that's another can of worms for another day.
Yes.
God in heaven. Anyway.
Lots of worms, lots of cans.
Oh, Lord. But no, it was the fact that the 6-axis didn't even work all that well. For me personally. Because I played Heavenly Sword around the time it was new. And in order to, like, there were sections where you had to defend your fort or defend yourself from, like, an incoming army using, like, a cannon. And you could adjust the trajectory of the cannonball mid-air using the 6-axis controller with pitch, yaw, and whatever else.
Oh my god.
And it was precise. Like, they wanted you to be precise about it.
Jeez.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It's a worse Wiimote that it was trying to be. And then, like I said, they finally added in the rumble feature later on down the line, and as soon as it was available, yoink!
Yeah,
Get
right.
out of here! I don't need you, freaking.
Oh man, you know
There's a lot of other stuff that we haven't even used, like the Kinect.
Yeah,
and
I
I'm
was
sure that
thinking
there's
about the
worse
Kinect,
stuff
too.
out there, but
I've tried the Kinect, and that is a pile of garbage, so I don't want to talk about it anyway.
yeah, but that's why people probably got to this point in the video. They're like, "Oh my god, I didn't even mention the Kinect. This
But
thing's
that's
terrible."
like an add-on. The Kinect to me is like an add-on.
I don't know.
product.
There were
It's
a lot of main
games
first-party
on it.
games that were designed
Okay,
for
see,
it.
my
Yeah.
main thing is, so I was working at Walmart at the time, and the Kinect came out, And their big thing advertising it was they would show these adorable little fuzzy
yes.
animals.
Connectimals.
Oh my
yes.
god,
Yeah.
the videos!
Trying
I
to
loved
sell.
E3 with that. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
Trying to sell this Connect. They were like, we know it's trash, but if we put cute animals
we know
on
it's trash.
if we put cute animals on it, people will buy
Would
it.
you like cute animals with your trash?
And we put Rare in charge of making the games for it as well.
Oh my god, I can't
People
do.
will buy it then.
People will buy it then. Oh my god,
Did
yeah.
people buy it? Not that I know of.
No.
They did, but how many of them continued to use it later? And did Microsoft care that they used it later? They made their
No.
money.
Yeah,
But
right.
anyway, so I never had a 360 or an Xbox One, so I never really used the
Yeah,
Kinect much. So,
I never used it. I just saw it.
however,
Mm-hmm.
the one controller that neither of you talked about that I would like to go into
Mm-hmm.
is the Wii U Gamepad. That is my most hated controller.
Yeah.
I can see
So
that.
here's the thing.
Well, we didn't play it. That's why.
Right. So here's the thing.
Mhm.
I'm glad it exists for the sheer fact that we got the Switch
It made
out of
the
it.
Switch. Yes.
Yes. But
But.
so okay.
And Alex,
How best
in the
to go
words
about
of
this?
Alex, the big sweaty butt.
The
That's a big sweaty butt.
It was just gimmick central.
Yes.
And that's the big thing. Like, it was big and it was bulky because it had to have so much in it. Not only to accommodate for the touchscreen in the center, but the gyro and everything else in it. And also, basically, it was a mini Wii inside there as well,
Yeah.
so you could play it on that.
I honestly thought it was an add-on at first,
Yeah.
and a lot of people did, from what I heard later.
Exactly. No, but it was big and bulky, and if you were player one, more often than not, you had to also use the touchscreen. So imagine the original DS, Kim. You like that a lot, right?
Yeah.
Imagine that fitting in your hand nicely, being able to take the stylus and do what you need. Take away the stylus, make that original DS like 5 times bigger, heavier, and trying to hold it one-handed while pushing on it with your finger and try to get anything done.
And going up and down and up and down.
Yeah, like say you're playing Zombie U, a survival game where you have to pay attention to where the zombies are. In order to search anything, like if you're searching a dead person's backpack or a bookshelf for items you need, you have to hold up the Wii Gamepad, the Wii U Gamepad. Look at the item menu in there because it says on screen, look at the gamepad, not the screen. You're paying
Yep,
attention
look
to
at the
that.
gamepad.
And then zombies are chewing on the back of your skull before you know what's happening and you're dead.
So why even bother having the 2 screens if the screen on top just tells you to look at the other screen?
I think
Because
they
they-
thought that the DS was a great idea, and they tried to figure out how to do it for home
Well,
console.
that's the thing. That's what I always thought the Wii U was
Well,
later.
also, like, they
didn't
thought,
even
like, you know,
talk about
some
the touchscreen
games,
with the
some
DS.
games did it really well, where it's like,
Yeah.
that's your menu.
yes.
But the thing is, when I want a menu, I don't want the game to still keep going. I want to pause. So like,
Yeah,
what's the-
exactly. Like Pikmin 3.
or
if
like
you-
what I just did.
Or like what you just did, yeah. Well, like with Pikmin 3,
Mm-hmm.
you have to pay attention to the map down there, and if you want to issue commands to the other 2 players that are 2 characters that you use, you have to use the touchscreen in order to be able to do what you need while the game is still going on and the day is growing shorter
Wow,
and
you
shorter.
know what? Pikmin 3 Deluxe for the Switch just sounds better.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why it's
Now-
a big deal.
Yeah. So it's like I said, functionality-wise, like the buttons are fine, the shoulders are fine, the control stick's fine, whatever, but it's everything else attached to it that just
The
drags it
gimmickiness
down.
of just the
Well,
whole
if a
Yes.
controller itself can ruin Star Fox 64 in a remake, a beautiful remake.
Nintendo ruined Star Fox.
Yeah.
By trying to force us to use every functionality
I
of the
didn't
Wii
even,
U.
like, now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't even talk about the touchscreen with the DS's.
No.
Yeah, I mean they're fine, especially
It's
on the
fine.
original. But the DS
I think
Lite,
the
didn't
I
original,
really didn't like
I didn't
that.
like
It-
the DS Lite touch one. It wasn't as
The
good.
DS original ruined Metroid Prime Hunters.
Yeah,
Those controllers were terrible, and it was forcing that dumb control. There were 3 control schemes, which already tells you there's a problem. Something's not working right if you gotta have 3.
But there are some other games that use the DS double screen functionality very well.
Yeah.
Like,
I was gonna say, what? Oh gosh, what's the? There's like
I have knives everywhere.
there are full of knives, millions knives over here.
Yeah, Millen Knife Boy.
and for anybody who's just listening to this,
I'm
yeah,
still
we're
playing Nova Drift.
in a room with knives right now.
It's
You
okay.
might want to call somebody.
Yeah, but Oh, Dementium the Ward. That's what I'm thinking of for the DS, where that's a fine enough first-person shooter horror game that uses the touchscreen.
I liked just playing Pokemon on the DS because your menu was right there and you could select through things.
The Phoenix Wright games, where you could actually just bring up your evidence and just press it and move things around and solve little puzzles.
But see, the thing is, the difference between the touchscreen with the DS, the first DS, it was pretty sensitive.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to press too hard, whereas the DS Lite, I felt like I was stabbing it.
Yeah, you have to.
To get it to work, you know.
But imagine doing that on a gamepad that's, like I said, heavier and bulkier.
That's terrible. That's just terrible.
And you don't have a stylus. You're basically just using your finger. And you're just like
so
jabbing
glad
it.
you talked about the Wii U because
yeah,
we didn't have enough experience.
I know. I wanted to make sure that showed up.
Breath of the Wild with forced touchscreen functionality.
I don't know anything about that. No.
They were going to, and it could have been cool, but I'm glad we never got it because Nintendo might have screwed it up somehow.
Might have.
Would have screwed it up somehow. But yeah, I don't know. I love Nintendo overall, but for pity's sake,
why do we have the biggest complaints? I feel like about it. I don't know.
That's kind of weird. They're on both the top and bottom of this list.
I have no idea about
Oh yeah, the Sony 6-axis thing. Yeah, that still boggles my mind. Well, because they won the console war with the PS2. You're selling like over 150 million
the thing
units.
is, with the PS2, that was the whole thing. It was a DualShock analog controller, and that was beautiful.
But anyway, yeah, so there you go. Don't worry about going back to the Wii U or the PS3 unless if you have a DualShock 3 controller.
The PS3, I mean, I didn't bring it up because I was like, oh, it's just average, but now I know about this atrocity.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
But anyway, any other comments you guys want to make?
Yeah, controllers are good and controllers suck, so I guess you can let us know down in the comments below if you're over on YouTube.
Oh, or if anyone wants to tell us about this new Xbox controllers that you can customize to anything that you want.
Ooh, yeah. Or if anybody has a Steam Deck, let me know about that. I've been drooling over those things, except I've heard they've been drifting.
Already.
Yeah, so I have no idea. We could go on forever talking about controllers, and I honestly thought this would be a quick one. Whew.
Got some pinions.
Got some pinions anyway. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of HITBOX. If you enjoy the show, you can help us keep it alive by supporting us on Patreon with the links in the show notes in this video's description. For those of you on YouTube, remember to like the video and subscribe for more, and be sure to let us know what you thought of the show and other topics you'd like to hear us cover in the future. And special thanks to all of our amazing Patreon members. See you.
Bye-bye.
See you.